All right. Hey, folks. So today's topic is going to be about managing fatigue to get the most bang for our muscle building book, because that's what we're interested in, gaining mass. And that's what today's going to be about. So firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. Or if you'd like a different feature to interact with me on a more regular basis, there's also my Patreon, where I have lots of cool features. So go check that out as well and go sign up. All right, so let's get started with this topic. And let me just talk about what this first thing here, which is going to just showcase what I'm talking about. I made this post a while ago on my Instagram, and it demonstrates what happens to the body as we start to accumulate decent training over the course of many weeks. So I've got here a couple of lines. One of them refers to fitness. That is your ability to perform work in the gym and get better at the things you're trying to get better at. So grow muscles, all that kind of stuff. And the red line refers to fatigue. So essentially what happens is, as you're training, you should accumulate some fatigue, because as you accumulate useful stimulus and fitness in this sense, you start to get more and more tired as the weeks go on. So with proper stimulus comes fatigue. Now, if we want the most stimulus, we want to hit upon a style of training which minimizes fatigue and maximizes stimulus. Like, what would be disastrous for muscle growth is if we just did a bunch of work which wasn't really that specific to hypertrophy, and we tired ourselves out on that, because that wouldn't be very good, because we wouldn't have much room left for stuff which is going to make us grow. That's the basic premise of what I'm talking about. Is that all clear? So if that's clear, let's move on. So next is, let's just discuss firstly the aim of training. So the aim of training, hypertrophy training, bodybuilding training, gaining muscle, is to maximize stress on the relevant systems in the body. So the ones which are responsible for growing. Because just to kind of sidetrack for a second, as human beings, we are built to adapt, right? We have evolved to adapt, whatever. So we have evolved to adapt, right? That's what we do. Now, we adapt in lots of different ways. Like everyone has calluses on their hands from lifting weights, right? Pretty much everyone does. That's an adaptation, okay? But we're not going in the gym just to get calluses. Just like we're not going in the gym just to feel tired. We are going to the gym specifically to build muscle. So we want to maximize stress on the muscle building systems and minimize stress elsewhere, so that we ensure the majority of our training time and energy is funneled towards muscle building. We all agreed on that. So that means we need to minimize stress on the non-relevant systems in the body. So there are areas of the body we don't really need to force an adaptation, assuming we're interested in hypertrophy. And the greatest example of this is concurrent training. So if you're training for completely polar goals, like I don't know, like 2 different sports, you're going to have to split some of your time, and some adaptations will cross over. That's great. Some adaptations might not. So you have to be aware of that and manage your fatigue. So the way we do this is we focus on the parts which are going to give us what we want. We minimize stress on the parts which aren't. So that means we maximize our all over recovery abilities. The basic thing is, basic message from this slide is, keep your training specific. If your goal is to go in the gym and get jacked, the majority of your training should be aimed at getting jacked. And now we're going to talk about what that involves. So next slide. Okay, so one mistake that people make is going too heavy. This is often exacerbated by poor range of motion. So you get people who just do the extreme ends of a range of motion, like, for example, quarter squatters, which is really the worst thing to do, because with a quarter squat, you're not getting that productive deep stretch range at the bottom. You're actually all you're doing is you're minimizing stress on the muscles, and you're just loading up stress on the spine and on the knees and on the hips. So it's a 2-punch combo. You're getting less muscle stimulation and more stress on the joints, ligaments, and tendons. It's literally the worst thing to do. It doesn't make any sense at all. Especially when people say, I'm just testing out the knee. It's like, dude, it's going to be worse for your knees in the long run. So going too heavy is generally exacerbated by poor range of motion because you're stronger in that top range of motion. And not just for squats, for lots of things, okay? You see it all the time. The other reason, the other way that people go too heavy is it's poor load selection. So you know the guy, right? You know the guy who's been training for a while. He can hardly bench 2 plates. So what he does every now and again, when he's feeling kind of fruity, when he's feeling good, perhaps the old lady put out last night and he's feeling himself, So he goes in the gym. And he wants to load up the bar to 2 plates and he wants to try and bench press it. Fails miserably, obviously. But he has his spotter helping him, bounces it off his chest. He's like, just wanted to see where I'm at. It's like, bro, we know where you're at. You're right at the bottom of the pile. Like, we know. We all know. Everyone saw. So that asshole can go away. Like, we don't need to know where we're at. We don't want to have forced reps bouncing the weight off the chest. We don't want to have a poor range of motion. We don't want to have the reps really low and all those things, okay? So poor load selection is another reason. And finally, this is something that people do, is artificially elevating poundages. So using things like wraps and spotter forced reps in a very haphazard way, particularly the spotter forced reps. It really doesn't make much sense when you're bodybuilding, and wraps don't make any sense either. There's this one guy I know at the gym that not the gym that I go to, but he's from the same town that I am. And he wraps his elbows when he bench presses. So he wraps his wrists, right, which is fine. No problem with that. But he'll literally get a knee wrap and wrap it around his elbows. It's quite frankly the most stupid thing I've seen in my life. And this is the same guy who will constantly message me like every few months and say, Faz, you know what? I'm not growing. I don't know what it is. I'm like, yeah, bro. I don't know what it is either. I literally have no idea. It could be anything. It's probably magic. So I think people conflate just lifting more weight any way possible with more muscle. Like potentially if they had a Robocop with a metal sort of exoskeleton being their forced spotter and they actually bench pressed 500 kilos, somehow that would induce more growth. I believe these people fully believe that. I think that's what they think is going to cause them to grow because they do stupid things like wrapping their arms. It's insane. And these are wannabe bodybuilders. It's crazy. Anyway, I won't labor that point too much. That is going to heavy some ways that people do it. And all that generally tends to do is increase stress on the system because you've got to recover from all that. It's horrific. Now, the other side of the coin is going too light. So cause of going too light, the problem with going too light is it ends up being lots of non-stimulative work. Like if you're doing effective sets, like hard sets, there's a limit to what you can recover from, and you know that. You do a few hard sets of a squatting motion, leg pressing motion, a benching motion, a rowing motion, you're going to be beat up. Now, if you're the kind of guy who doesn't really take sets anything close to failure, you can just keep going forever. Hour, 2 hours, 6 days a week, it's fine. So the problem there is you're just effectively doing a lot of stuff and it's non-specific. So you've got this idea in your head that, okay, I want to do a lot of volume because I've been told volume is the prime driver for hypertrophy and you want to do loads of volume, but it's all really, really easy. So you just end up doing a lot of non-stimulative work. That's not good either. If it's not even close to failure and if you're not seeing any rep drop off at all, which I talked about in my How to Know You're Working Hard Enough video, which seemed to have created quite an impact on a lot of people, you should be seeing rep drop off. So if your first set is 12, your next set is 12, and the set after that is 12 with the same weight, well, clearly your first 2 sets were piss easy. Okay. Now there are some exceptions. Ranked beginners tend to do quite well because they can't put that much into a set. But everyone else, we should be seeing rep drop-offs. Also, it's harder to see rep drop-offs on lower rep sets. Higher rep sets is easier. But in any case, for the majority of things, all we want to do is we want to avoid aiming for 12, 12, 12. We want to just be working hard that we do see some fatigue being built. Because again, stimulus and fatigue grow together. We just try to reduce the fatigue and maximize the stimulus, which is what this video is about. The other way that people go too light is excessively short rest periods. I mean, I think highly conditioned advanced athletes can use 1 minute rest periods on isolation exercises. I do that a lot of times and it works great. However, I would be cautious about doing that when you don't have the ability to really push yourself or your conditioning is not great, because they can very quickly drop off a cliff into junk volume. So you really got to know what you're doing. The other thing is excessive focus on the pump. I don't see too much of this in my circles, okay, because most of the guys who come to me, they understand the meaning of hard work, at least in principle. But you see a lot at the gym. It's just guys who do supersets, trisets, giant sets, which are fine, but in a very kind of haphazard way. I see it a lot at the gym that I go to, with one PT in particular. He's really, really big on like giant sets, and it just looks like really piss-ass training, basically. So it all allows you to get better at just doing work. But the thing is, that's not the adaptation we're after. Train in with any really big guy at the gym, and you'll see they're not just doing work. They are brutalizing themselves. There's a difference. And I think there's an issue with going too light. And this is one of the reasons why I think the RIR talk does tend to be so controversial on YouTube, because most people don't get the idea that you've got to push really hard. So anyway, that's a different topic. So in terms of what we are looking for, there's quite a lot we can do. Firstly, use a full range of motion. There's really no excuse. You should definitely be getting into the stretch range of motion. Like with the squat, if you're going to do a partial squat, do the bottom half. Don't do the top half. Use a full range of motion, okay? It means, it guarantees that the weight you have on the bar is likely going to be a little bit less, or a lot less, actually, than you would do. Yeah, a lot less than you would do if you were doing a partial range. So use a full range of motion. It's the first thing you can do. You can play around with some partials later when you're more advanced and you know what you're doing, okay? There are some instances where it might be better, but for the majority of people, start with a full range of motion. If you're not a completely advanced individual, don't go there. Next thing is take your sets close enough to failure. Now there is an RIR nuance here. If I want to keep it simple, just go to the point where you've got 1 or 2 reps left in the tank. But if you are anything other than a advanced trainee, probably just train all the way to what you perceive to be failure or close to failure, because RIR is very difficult to gauge for beginners and early intermediates. And connected to that point, particularly for the advanced guys, limit the amount of sets you do to actual failure. Like, limit them. You don't have to avoid them completely, but limit them. You may have weeks where you go to failure in a block. You may have 1 set for every body part per week, something like that. But limit the failure work, because it tends to really drive apart that relationship of stimulus to fatigue. So stimulus to fatigue, rising up quite nicely. Those last 1 or 2 reps to failure, where you're really like grinding out the reps, they cause a lot more fatigue than they do stimulus. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Next thing is pick a decent rep range. Keep your reps in that sort of 5 to 20, 5 to 30 rep range, which has been proven to be quite effective. I mentioned it in a previous video as well. Keeping that percentage of the bar around about 60% to 85% is about right. Not too heavy, not too light. Those higher rep ranges and the lower percentages almost mandate going to failure though. So again, if you're not an advanced trainee, probably limit those. Yeah. Next, connected to this point is, more than likely using a variety of rep ranges is going to make things easier on your recovery, which allows you to do more. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you were doing 20 sets of chest per week, and let's say they were all in the 5 rep range. More than likely, that would cause more fatigue than if you did a third in the 5 to 10 rep range, another third in the 15 rep range, and another third in the 20 rep range. So the variety allows you to do more with less fatigue, so it's more stimulating. So just bear that in mind. Next thing is, do enough volume to continue to ensure progression week to week. Now notice the way I've worded that. You do enough volume to ensure progression week to week. The progressive overload element that everyone loves to bang on about with low volume routines, you do that in high volume routines as well. It's just that the volume drives the overload. Do enough volume to make sure you are progressing week to week to week. And the progression is evidenced by the added weight on the bar. That makes sense. Or more reps, whatever. Almost the last thing is use reasonable rest periods. So make sure your rest periods are short enough that you're not spending an excessive time in the gym, but also make sure that they're long enough so that your sets are actually productive. And there will be some variance. Advanced you are, what exercises you're choosing, whether they're machine exercises, isolations, compounds. and also the ability to push yourself. And finally, the entire summary of this whole video is you're trying to maximize stress on the muscles to maximize growth. You're trying to minimize stress on the other systems of the body which are related but which don't contribute towards hypertrophy, so that you can apply more and more stimulus onto actual muscle growth. So bottom line is, avoid doing stupid stuff like wrapping your arms for bench press. Avoid doing quarter squats, just dumb. Avoid doing that. Avoid doing excessively low reps to test where you're at. Avoid the dumb stuff so that you can pour more focus into the stuff which is going to help you grow muscle, if that's what you're after. Right, folks, I'm going to call it there, and I will speak to you all in the next one. You have a great day. Take it easy.